Hey mamas, this is Playfully Faithful Parenting, and I'm your host, Joy Wendling. I'm a seminary grad and children's and family minister turned stay-at-home mom to my 5 girls. Spiritual parenting is my calling, and it's my passion to help other mamas disciple their kids using the power of play and their own authentic daily walk with Christ. If you're a mama who wants to introduce your kids to Jesus and watch as the Holy Spirit transforms their lives, this is the place for you. I'm so glad you're here. So let's dive in and see how we can partner with God today. Hey mamas, welcome back to Playfully Faithful Parenting. I'm your host Joy, and I'm excited to be here today. I hope you are too. I can't believe that I have faithful listeners that come back week after week. Well, mamas, I would love to know who you are. So please reach out to me and tell me who you are. I want to know how you play, who your kids are, what your kids like to play, how your kids like to play. Anything that you want to tell me, I want to know who you are. So reach out on Instagram or Facebook or even email joy@createdtoplay.com. I would love to know who you are. So mamas, I'm just so grateful that you keep coming back week after week. Today, I want to share something about creativity. I have been thinking about process art versus product art for our kids over the last month or so at least. And my kids love what they call a project. I want to do a project, and I just lay out materials and they put together something. Sometimes I give a little direction, but most of the time I just lay stuff out and let them do whatever they want with it. And this is called process art. It gives kids an opportunity to practice creativity. Product art is where we have a particular craft and it has to look a certain way. And we expect kids to put the eyeballs in the right spot, and the hands have to go here and the other hand has to go there. And I'm going to help you glue just to make sure that it ends up in the right spot and that it looks the way I, as the one assigning the project, it needs to look the way I want it to look. That is product art. That is about the product that the kids end up with, as opposed to the process of art. And I've been thinking about this, and I'm just, even when I had my preschool years ago, I tried to encourage a lot more process art. Occasionally we would have a craft, but the kids still were able to make them look how they wanted to look. There wasn't, maybe it's October, so Halloween, so we would do a spider, but their spider could have 12 legs or it could have 3 legs, and it could be colored purple or it could be colored black or it could be yellow with pink stripes. So there was a little bit of a idea that we're making spiders, but there was still so much openness in the project that it still leaned heavily on the side of process art. And that is just based on my research and even my theology art. I've never called it that, but kind of where I'm going today, it's what I feel is the better option for kids is process art. So, but I just couldn't get a whole episode for process art versus product art. And I just didn't feel good about it. Like I just couldn't figure out. I knew that the topic was something that was on my heart, and I thought it was a good thing for you guys to hear, because I think it will help our kids when we are using art to teach our kids about the Bible and about God, that I think leaning towards process art as opposed to here's a project and a product and I want you to draw this picture of Jesus and draw the little boy and his 2 fishes and his loaves of bread. Like, that's what it needs to look like. as opposed to let's read the story. And what do you think happened? How do you think the boy felt? Let's talk about the people. Let's talk about where do you think they were? What kind of fish do you think? What shape do you think the bread might have been? Okay, we've talked about it. We've read the story. We've thought about how we might feel. Maybe we've had a snack. Here are some art supplies. What kind of project is the Holy Spirit leading you to create? How do you want to express your thoughts and feelings of this story of Jesus and this miracle of feeding thousands and thousands of people with a little boy's lunch? How do you want to express that on paper or with clay or with whatever project supplies you give them? So I think that is going to be a much more meaningful experience than here's 2 paper fish and a paper, loaf of bread. Let's glue these together and count that as an art experience, because that's not going to really engage your kid or grow their faith. But I've been like, how do I do this? And then I started thinking about the why, because I love thinking about the whys. I'm a very logical person. And when I understand the whys behind things, it makes the practice so much easier for me. And so process versus product, why is process art so much better for our kids theologically, right? Because I believe that if science proves it, that God has a hand in it. Science is just really an exploration of what God has done here on earth and in space or wherever. And I think science is an exploration of what God has done and the way God has set the world into motion. And so for me, here's my thinking is if we can understand why the process art is going to hit our kids and their spirit and their soul more, and then that's for me an easier reason, more motivating of doing process art with my kids. Even though it might look prettier and it might be easier to gift at Christmas, a craft of something that has a clear expectation of, I want to give grandma this project, and so this is what we're going to do together, is not going to be as meaningful. And when I know the whys behind it, I'm going to be more motivated to do something that's better for my kids, as opposed to just what I think is going to be prettier, right? So here we go. Creativity. Process art leans much more heavily on creativity and encourages our kids to be creative. And when we are being creative, we are imaging and reflecting who God is. The very first verb we hear God doing in the Bible is creating. Why are we going to stifle our kids from being able to do the very thing that God first told us about himself, which is in the beginning, God created? I want to give my kids so many opportunities to be like God and to live into their being made in his image, and giving them opportunities to be creative is just one of these ways that we can help our kids see they are made in God's image. And so creativity for me is my big why. And it's one of my favorite things about God. I think it's so easy to look around the world and see God's creativity. It's so easy to bring myself back when I am becoming harsh or critical or judgmental to think, how is this person a reflection of God? How are they made in his image? what can I learn about God from this person? And it usually creativity is one of the things that so easily brings me out of this judgmental place, right? Is if I can see God's creativity in another person or their ideas, it opens me up. It makes me more open-minded, and it helps me to come back to a healthy, loving, graceful place, right? So in the beginning, God created. That's, to me, is just huge. God created us in his image. God created the world. God created the birds. God created the plants. There's so much God created, and we can look at all of these things and just, I'm astonished, and I love talking about it with my kids. We can see his creativity, especially in nature and in us. And I want my kids to be drawn into that and to continue to live into that. And this doesn't happen, right? As we grow, we lose our imagination and our creativity. And we don't have to, but we typically do. And typically, a big reason, research shows a big reason we lose a lot of our creativity is education and just the way that our educational system is set up. And I am not bashing public schools. My oldest daughter goes to public school and will go to public school. My husband is a public school teacher. But research has shown that we lose a lot of our creativity just because of the way our educational system is set up. So I think there are ways that we can work around this, and that it's possible to keep our creativity or to relearn to be creative. So there was this study that I heard about this summer, and it's so interesting. NASA hired these scientists to come up with a creative test because they wanted to give this test to their rocket scientists and engineers and to see how creative they were, and to test, I think, maybe like potential scientists and engineers, and to hire, the most creative people. So NASA had this test designed, and if you pass the test, you're considered a creative genius. So NASA uses this test. It meets all their purposes. But the two scientists who created the test were curious, like, where does this creativity come from? And so they take the test and they give it to 1,600 children between the ages of 4 and 5. And when they got the test results back from these preschoolers, they found that 98% of these preschoolers could pass the test. And so, as one article I'll link in the show notes puts it, all of us have a creative gene. Science here is showing research. I love scientific research. I know it's not for some people, but for me it is. And so for my listeners, I'm assuming you're going to get into it, or you go for it because you're listening, right? So anyhow, science is showing this is one of the ways that we are created in God's image, is we are created creative, right? All of us have a creative gene, is what this article says. So then they decide to make it a longitudinal test. So they're going to follow these kids that they've tested throughout their high school or throughout their educational system, and follow them and test them again after high school. So they test them 5 years after their first test. And at that point, only 30% of those kids still fell in the genius category of creativity and imagination after only 5 years. So they're 10 years old, and only 30% of them are still creative and imaginative geniuses. At 15 years old, there were only 12%. And then as adults, it's only 2%. 2% are all that's left in this creative genius. We are falling away from one of the ways that we are created in God's image. We are creative. You were creative at one point in your life if you're not still creative. It's in there. You have this capability. And these scientists have come up with ways that we can still seek out and grow that imagination and that creativity. It says that capability of the 5-year-old is still in you. It never goes away. We just lose practice of using it. You were created in the image of a creative God, and that doesn't go away. It's still there. God is creative. Look at the peacock. Look at all these other beautiful flowers and plants and the colors and birds and the blobfish and all these weird and wacky animals and beautiful colors. And I mean, just the intricacies of nature and of people and the way that we grow and develop and all of those things. It's so creative and remarkable and miraculous. And we have in us a creative ability just like our Creator, because we are created in His image. And so what the scientists came up with, their idea is their example is take a fork, like a table fork, and come up with 25 or 30 ideas of how to improve the fork or ideas of how to use it. And don't ever count any of those ideas as dumb or say it won't work or any of those things. Just go for it. Make a list, a wild, crazy list of ways to use a fork, or of, find a toy with your kids and come up with a list of silly things you can do with it, or take a scarf and let's find 10 ways that we can put the scarf on our bodies. Maybe you wrap it around a leg. Maybe you tie it on an ear. Maybe you put it in a bow. Maybe you blindfold yourself. Maybe you wear it as a diaper. I don't know. But come up with crazy, silly ideas and just keep going. And don't let any of your ideas be stifled by the part of your brain that starts analyzing and criticizing. Let that part go for a bit. That's there and it's necessary. That is called convergent thinking. And that's what the schools teach us how to do. And it's useful and it's helpful and we need that, but not when it causes us to completely give up our divergent thinking, which is the creative thinking. And that just kind of can go crazy and look at all the possibilities. So I don't know what to do with that for you guys, but that's what we have for today, is encouraging you to play creatively and with your imagination, both you and your kids, and be more open-ended with your art projects and make a new recipe. Don't use a recipe. Take some ingredients in your kitchen tonight for dinner and throw them together and let's see what you can do, because you are created in the image of a very creative God. And whether you believe it or feel it or what, you are still creative. It's still in you. It's a part of who you are. It's who you were created to be. And our kids are created that same way. They have imagination and creativity, and we need to find ways to continue to allow them to express that, and we need to encourage that and help them to grow in that as they grow in being able to analyze things and figure out what works and what doesn't work through experimenting and playing with things. But please just know you are creative because God is creative and He made you in His image. Mamas, thanks for listening to this. I don't know, my thought process about process art, product art, theology, creativity, being made in God's image, this NASA study. It's all so fascinating to me. And I love the way that theology and theory enhances our motivation in our practice. And when we know better, we can do better. And so, mamas, I just encourage you to find a way to be creative this week, whether it's in the kitchen, with your kids, doing some Bible journaling, doing your own art, whatever it is, find a way to play creatively and just spend time delighting in the way that we were created, just in his image, how we can reflect God, and don't judge whatever product comes out, because it's not about the product. It's about the process and about finding a new way to just be a little bit more like our God, our creator, and living into that and experiencing that and knowing and just basking in the miracle that we are, and what a blessing and like how humbling it is that God wanted us to be like him in a way. I mean, we're not completely like him, but we are a reflection of him, and we are made like him. And so just bask in that this week, reflect in that, live into that creatively and playfully. And so on behalf of God, thank you for loving and playing with his kids. Well, mamas, that's it for today. Thanks for joining me on Playfully Faithful Parenting. I'd love to keep the conversation going over on the socials. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. If you felt encouraged or equipped by today's show, do me a favor and leave a review. I can't wait to hear your story. Till next week, keep playing and pointing those littles to Christ.